In this video, I want to start with Chapter 4 on the fugue. And the definition of what a fugue is, it's a polyphonic composition that's based on one main theme called the subject, and it's been a cornerstone of Baroque music throughout the whole time period. And of course, Johann Sebastian Bach is the composer who is mostly associated with this fugue instrumental piece. The form of a fugue can be very flexible. Every fugue starts with a subject in one voice that's being a melody that kind of unifies the piece as a whole. And when I say one voice, I'm not specifically speaking about a singing voice there, but particularly one particular pitch range of an instrument there. Could be for multiple instruments, but in a lot of cases it's for just one keyboard instrument, such as an organ or a harpsichord. At the very beginning, you start off with this subject in a monophonic texture that gives the subject the spotlight and lets listeners know what they should be listening out for the whole piece. Another aspect of the fugue is that it always uses imitation. And as I mentioned earlier, J.S. Bach didn't invent the fugue, but even to this day, J.S. Bach's fugues are still said to be unmatched by any other composer. As far as the art of the fugue, or what makes a fugue quite special, is that the imitation goes beyond what you might hear in compositions from previous composers, or like what you normally hear in rounds like row, row, row your boat there. The melody or the subject can come back and start on different pitches. They can even come back in various forms, such as inversions of the melody, retrograde, augmentation, and diminution of various melodies. And also the composer is free to also include counter subjects, different types of melodies that present different melodic ideas as well. On the bottom of page 107, they show you how a subject can be introduced to you in a soprano voice, and then an answer comes back in the alto, and then you have this kind of cascading effect going on in between all the different voices going on in the fugue form. Here is an example of a fugue, the Bach's Little Organ Fugue in G minor in your textbooks, which you can read about. But there's also on the Online Learning Center, if you go to Part 3, Chapter 4, click on the capstone activity, and there's actually a fugue, another fugue by Johann Sebastian Bach called the Fugue in C minor. Right? You can read a little bit, some background on this particular piece and how it compares to that one here. But I think it's a real nice illustration here of the way that the fugue is utilized in this Baroque form here. As I mentioned, every fugue starts off with the subject, and this one's in C minor, and the subject sounds kind of like this here. So it has some repetition of some motives in there that makes it kind of memorable to the ear. But that's what you should be listening out for when it occurs later in the piece. And that starts off in one voice here, the alto voice alone in a minor key. But then right after that is followed by the subject being played in the soprano, with the counter subject being carried over by the alto in this kind of seamless transition here. So for this one, you'll notice here at the top, the soprano takes over. While the alto, who initially had the subject, has this counter subject that goes underneath it. And then when you put it together, you have this kind of, these two different melodies that are of relatively equal importance there, but Bach makes them work and pleasing to the ear without too many dissonances. Or at least with dissonances, they're still able to be easily handled by listeners. And then he continues this kind of cascading motion throughout it in the bridge with just a fragment of the subject here. Just taking that motive there and tagging it along while underneath it has this ascending sequence played underneath it. So it's really fascinating how he's able to make all these different ideas work together at the same time. As you could see, as you can click through this whole listening guide together here, you see how complex he eventually gets towards the latter part of the piece here, where there's various fragments of the subject being strewn about on the various voices. But listen to the whole thing from beginning to end, and you'll see how Bach is just a master at developing these fugal subjects and letting them spin off into an elaborate composition. The next part of the video I want to discuss are the latter chapters in the Baroque period, and those cover two composers. One of them is Antonio Vivaldi, who's probably one of the most celebrated instrumental composers from this time period, if not all of music history. He was born in Venice and actually studied both music and theology, even serving as a priest at one point of his life, but found his calling in music. Where he taught and composed and conducted the music school of the Pietà, which is an interesting story because this music school of the Pietà was an institution for orphaned and illegitimate girls in Venice, and Vivaldi was able to take this, maybe which on the surface might not seem like the most ideal of musical careers there, but made quite a number of wonderful concerts presented by these all-female music groups, both vocal and instrumental, where they would present all these Sunday and holiday concerts. And that's kind of the musical context that all his compositions are pretty much, a bulk of his compositions were created was in this setting and composed mostly for these girls that he was teaching at this institution of Pietà. Vivaldi's compositions include about 450 concerto grossi and solo concertos. We talked about concerto grossi before, where there's a group of soloists. Solo concertos is where there's just one soloist and the full tutti orchestra that includes the strings and the basso continuo. Its probably most popular work is La Primavera, or the Spring Concerto, which comes from a set of 4 solo concertos entitled, appropriately, The Four Seasons. This Spring Concerto is a solo string concerto where there's one violin soloist, which makes sense because Antonio Vivaldi, his main instrument, was a virtuoso at the violin. And it's also an example of program music, where the music was composed with a specific idea, poem, story, or scene in mind. And Vivaldi included even these little sonnets or poems before each concerto and included descriptions in the musical score. What I'd like you to do on your own, if you haven't done so already, is go into the Online Learning Center, Part 3, Chapter 10, and there's this web exercise that I'd like you to complete for this unit. And there's a pretty good brief online biography that covers Vivaldi, and you can also find some wonderful resources as far as listening to some of his music, including the Spring Concerto. Also do the same thing for Johann Sebastian Bach. There's chapter 11 in part 3 is devoted to Johann Sebastian Bach. Read through that whole chapter on his life and his contributing works there. And there's these wonderful web exercises here, 2 wonderful websites on his biography, and also even this clickable map of his musical journey throughout Europe. And it's interesting to kind of follow in Bach's footsteps through this website, and then submit all these just these 4 questions here. Try to answer them in as much detail as you can. Where was the artist born and educated? His contemporaries, most important musical pieces, and what were his most important musical accomplishments based off of your readings in the textbook and also these websites.